Welcome to Elemental Energy, the podcast where we discuss how to simplify decarbonization. Here, we will introduce emerging low-carbon energy technologies and give you insight on how to navigate and support the evolving energy landscape. It is our goal to develop content to give you confidence to help transition the market and make low-carbon energy reliable and affordable. I'm your host, Marcia Leonard. Hi, everyone. So today's episode, we are going to be talking about something critically important, one of the most important topics within our industry, actually, and that's safety. We're going to talk about what it looks like during the energy transition and how we can adopt a mindset of learning and growth in order to help this transition become a little bit smoother. So I was like, oh, I should probably bring in a safety professional for this topic. And I just happen to know one of the global safety industry leaders in our industry. And he comes with 30 years of experience from boots on the ground all the way to the implementation of corporate safety policies and procedures. He is the author of several different safety articles. He's published in Tech Review, Safety and Health, but one of his most favorite pieces of mine is a book called Little B's Safety Coaching, where he actually co-authored it with his wife, Madeline. And lastly, he was a collegiate football player. I bring this up for 2 points because one, I believe that's where his safety and leadership skills really began. And two, because if you are listening to this instead of watching it on YouTube, his heart and his personality are as big as he is. So before I transition it over to him to further introduce himself, I would like the pleasure of introducing Mr. Britt Howard. Welcome to Elemental Energy, Britt.
Thank you, Marcia. It's fantastic to be here. You're taking this, which is great because I'm going to start using that as my opener for the opportunities I get to present at different industrial forums. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
I am just stating facts. I have had the pleasure of getting to know you now for the last year and seeing the impact that you have on the people around you, especially how you serve others in this realm of safety. It is critical, and you do such an excellent job of it. The world is
Thank you.
absolutely lucky to have you, Brett.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, Brett, I want you to give a little bit deeper background of some of your safety implementations when it comes down to corporate. I just want people to get to know you a little bit more from your mouth because I can talk all day about you, but I want you to know you.
The most important thing that you shared during the opener, you used the term boots on the ground. I am a firm believer that to serve others, you have to either be profoundly empathetic and or have the same experiences they do in the challenges that they meet day to day. So when I visit our work family members at projects and in locations, at sites, I've been where they are, even though I come sometimes in a suit and tie. Sometimes I'm in coveralls, sometimes I'm in dress shoes, sometimes I'm in safety shoes, but I have experienced what they experience. And my overall objective is to serve them. I was thinking about this earlier in preparing for this podcast, and I've always dreamed, and I've plotted it in places that I've worked. You think about an organizational chart, and you have the top leader at the very top of the organization structure goes down. My organization and my spirit, my heart, my mind is inverted. I'm at the bottom, and I serve the work family members going up. And typically the work family members that need the most service, that need the most help, that need the most coaching or mentoring, are those that don't have as much experience, don't have as much influence, don't have as much resources at their fingertips. And they're at the top. That's the ones I need to spend the most time with. That's the ones I need to pour my experience, my expertise, my energy, my philosophies in as much as possible. So I'm just a safety guy. I'm very blessed to have worked for 8 global organizations as a safety engineer, moving all the way up to the vice president over an entire organization at one point. Started out as a professional firefighter. So I've been on the reactive end of responding to emergencies where people were injured or there were chemical releases or automobile accidents. And that's where I developed, man, I can do so much more in this space. I loved serving people in my community as a professional firefighter, but I could do so much more in the prevention of those events from ever happening. And that's when I went on to get my master's degree in safety and certifications in safety and health in multiple countries. With all that said, I'm just a safety guy and I'm blessed. And I am pleased that people have an interest like you do right now, and the people that are watching or listening to this to hear what I have to say based upon my experience and my expertise. Thank you.
We are so happy to hear it. I want to get into the prevention side after a few questions, but what I really like to do is I like to arm our listeners with some facts around climate change because we're on the reactive side of climate change right now and how to combat it. So, if you are willing, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. I'm going to ask you a few questions. There's no right or wrong answer, but this is what I like to call a round of did you know?
Mhm.
You up for it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. Rick, did you know there is a correlation with the number of wildfires and climate change?
I did know that.
Mhm. Due to hotter and drier temperatures, soils are becoming more arid and they're becoming more intense and destructive, specifically across the United States and Australia. I'm sure you know that having a fire background.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am.
So, did you know glaciers melting are not only causing sea levels to rise, but also desalinating crucial parts of the ocean, which cause currents to turn?
I did not know that.
So, along with the rise in ocean sea levels, there is an issue in the northern hemisphere where when these glaciers melt, they're desalinating the ocean, which is actually causing the current to pause. It's called the transatlantic current. And who knows how large of effect this will have or how long it's going to continue to do this, but it's a very severe issue. Did you know in 2021, Miami installed pumps, large bilge pumps underneath their streets and in their city in order to combat high tide?
I did not know that.
Yes, it is such a real issue with sea levels rising that Miami is already undergoing this. And they have installed measurements, a $400 billion job, by the way, to put in all of these pumps to try and keep the high tide out of their streets. But now imagine having a third world country being impacted by the same high tides and levels and situation, and they don't have those kind of measurements.
All right. They don't have the resources.
Correct. And that has actually happened in the Pacific Islands. There are 5 islands that are completely underwater in the Solomon Islands and entire cultures displaced.
Wow.
Yeah. So I like to arm people with this kind of knowledge to help people realize that this is real, it's happening. Our corporations are shifting to an ESG mindset, an
Hmm.
environmental, social, and governance mindset, because it is our responsibility to serve others and take care of others, isn't it?
That's right. For generations to come.
Mhm. All right. I think that is an excellent segue into servant leadership and taking care of our people. So I have a couple of questions for you, Brett. What is happening within the industry to prepare for these new kind of technologies to support the energy transition?
So, from a safety perspective, we are digging in on the new and or different hazards that can be presented in this energy transition, whether it's more use of hydrogen, nuclear, solar, different ways of water management, turning water into energy. Wind has become very popular, shore and onshore. And I was thinking about how we'll respond to this question if you did ask. And I wanted to come up with something that was nifty, something that sounded profoundly intelligent. I don't know if it's nifty. I don't know if it's profoundly intelligent, but it's real. And it goes back to the basic hierarchy of hazard control, which the first one is to eliminate the hazard altogether, whether it's nuclear, whether it's solar, whether it's traditional energy, oil or gas, whether it's a dropped object, eliminate the hazard from ever happening. If you cannot do that, is being step number one, then you want to reduce or substitute the hazard out to something that's less hazardous. And if you can't do that, then you provide engineering controls, which is typically where you see a lot of these new energy transitions going to. Whether it's nuclear, we want to separate, we want to have shielding to protect the work family members that are working at the nuclear facility or the people around the nuclear facility. We want to shield them from the radiation. We want to shield them from the hazard. I've had the opportunity during my career to visit 3 nuclear plants. I've had the opportunity to go into a decommissioned nuclear reactor in Scotland. And you would have thought that it was profoundly active. The way that I had to suit up, the way that I had to do biometric testing before going in, biometric testing coming out of the nuclear reactor to make sure that I was not exposed, or at least exposed to a level that would cause some type of health issue for me. I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to visit different places around the world, inclusive of the energy transition. 2 years ago, the company that I worked for, we built a solar panel farm. And just looking at the different types of hazards that we need to be aware of and control, going back to the hierarchy of control, making sure that our work family members are knowledgeable of the hazards, number one, can easily identify and recognize and evaluate the seriousness of the hazard. And then the ultimate is to manage and or control. The last level, the last type, the last implementation of control is that of PPE, gloves, hats, safety glasses, suits. Even though we use in conjunction with all the other training, engineering, substitution, reduce it. Maybe we can't eliminate it all the way, but reduce it to a point where we can manage it, where we can control it. PP is typically a part of that, but it should be the last resort. So even though I couldn't come up with anything that was nifty or profoundly intelligent, it goes back to the mindset that we must identify, recognize, and manage the risk, no matter what it is. I'll be operating my automobile later on today, and there's risk associated with that. When I leave this podcast, I have to descend the stairs. There's risk associated with that. Fortunately, this is what I do for a living, and this was what I love to do. So everything I do is a part of risk identification and the risk control. But in this energy transition stage that we're going into, we're leaning into, and we should be, there's some things that our work family members may not be as aware of when we compare it to traditional energy sources.
I like that you say you wanted to come up with something profoundly intelligent and nifty for this, but the whole point of this podcast is to try and help people understand that it's simple. We're going to
Mhm.
simplify decarbonization to get there. And as you just explained, there are already policies and practices in place and processes that we follow in the safety industry side of things that is going to lead us into this energy transition. So that's an excellent question or an excellent answer, Britt. And I want to know, in regards to technologies like nuclear and hydrogen, how do you, as one of the top safety professionals in the world, approach enlightening others about the rigorous standards in place?
It's very simple. Well, I say it's very simple to, lean off of your wording earlier. I have to reach their hearts and minds and help them to recognize that even though we're using the term hazard, we're using the term risk, which is blanket terms. When we talk about nuclear, we're talking about radiation, we're talking about profound adverse health effects if we have exposure. Number one, this not only impacts you, this can impact your work family members, this can impact your family if you take it home. So I first have to capture their hearts and minds. This is serious. Then we go into the policies, the procedures, the hazard control methods that are in place. And we get them to do the things that we want them to do because they want to do it. So it's not the presence of Britt or Marsha or Joe or Lucy that promotes the implementation of whatever we need to do to protect ourselves. But we get our work family members to do the right thing because they want to do it. And I use for an example, I just wrote an article last week about the use of seatbelts. I'm old enough that seatbelts weren't a requirement when I was a child. And I remember riding in the front seat of my parents' station wagon in the middle of my mom and my dad. Nobody wore seatbelts. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. But I remember I wanted to show my dad, I wanted to practice how to operate an automobile by watching him because I wanted a go kart. That was my driver of why I was sitting up there. And then a few years later, seatbelts were required by law, but people still did not wear them because they didn't like them. They seemed cumbersome. They wrinkle up their clothes. I remember a law enforcement officer telling me one time that he was not going to wear a seatbelt because it would put stains on his tie. And now I can't think of anybody that's in my immediate circle of trust that would ride in and or operate an automobile without having a seatbelt on. I don't even think about putting my seatbelt on. It's as natural to me as brushing my teeth. I wish I could say it was as natural to me as combing my hair, but you see, that has long passed. But it's natural. So if you take that natural implementation of doing something that somebody else wanted me to do, but now because I want to do it, that's where we need to go when it comes to the hazards associated with nuclear, with hydrogen, with natural gas, with petrochemicals, with operating an automobile, with descending the stairs in my home, that I'm going to do it because I want to do it. But it started out because somebody else wanted me to do it. That is my challenge. That is my opportunity. That is my blessed space on earth, is to help others to embrace the concept that there's risk associated with everything we do. We don't need to be scared. We need to be knowledgeable, and we need to trust that there are methods in place to prevent the events, whether it's individual events or whether it's community impacting events such as a nuclear power plant meltdown, because of the lack of human factors, the lack of human implementation, the lack of human control. I do not believe that we'll ever get away from humans being in place to monitor, to influence, to implement. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and where it's taking us as far as humankind. The greatest, the best, the most profound intelligence comes from us in identifying, recognizing, and managing those risks will always be in place, no matter what the energy source is, whether it's traditional or it's transformational, whether we're talking about Mother Earth or we're talking about putting gasoline into our car or charging up our EV. There are things that we need to be aware of, and there's things that we need to do because we want to do them.
Britt, you started on a topic when it comes down to, nuclear meltdowns. I mentioned in a previous episode to this one about it's very sad what happened with Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and the stigma that it has placed on nuclear. But I have to this is where I've adopted a learning mindset. I have to look at it as like those learning moments may have had to happen in order for our engineers to design redundant safety measures within these new designs of small modular reactors and these newer nuclear facilities. So it I really want to stress that it's a learning mindset that people need to adopt to understand what happened in those instances. And these safety measurements moving forward have become that much stronger from them. So, another question I have is, what questions are you being asked most often from just people about the energy transition?
Similar to what you started out with, what things are being discussed, what new safety techniques are being introduced, what should we know, what should they know about the different hazards associated with nuclear or hydrogen or solar or wind. And again, I've been challenged. I wrote a magazine article on this topic a few months ago. It goes back to the basics. It goes back to the basics. And I'll lean into where you just talked about the learning mindset. Build upon what we already know. Embrace learning not only from your own experiences, but man, in 2023, you can Google anything and get so much information about that. So you don't have to depend upon your own experience or even the experience within your circle of trust. You can get experiences from across the globe, whether it was 20 years ago or 10 minutes ago, if somebody chose to share it. So the questions I get is, should we be doing anything different? And of course, technology takes us into better capability when it comes to engineering controls, the shielding I talked about with nuclear. It brings us to greater capabilities within, I'll use hydrogen as an example. I used to work with hydrogen 20 years ago at one of the chemical facilities I supported. And one of the ways, and don't laugh, Marcia, but one of the ways that we would test for hydrogen leaks and the possibility for fire explosion is we would take a broom and stick it into where we thought that the hydrogen leak could be. And we wouldn't ignite it, but if there was a potential for it to ignite, we would see the broom wave because it's clear, and it actually burns clear if it's pure hydrogen. And we would see the particulates come off of the straw broom if it was actually involved in any type of fire decomposition due to the heat. We've come a long way from that now. We have sensors, we have specific people focused in on the right construction materials when it comes to the piping work and the valves. And that was 20 years ago. We're eons beyond that now when it comes to the technology and also the capability of the human beings, the capabilities of the specialists, the design engineers, the process safety engineers compared to where we were 20 years ago. When I was working 20 years ago, I'm a lot different. I'm a lot better. I'm a lot mature, knowledgeable. Anything you want to put on there that's positive when it comes to the capability that I have now in 2023 compared to where I was in 2003. I just didn't know as much as I know now. And that goes to where you leaned into earlier, having that learning mindset, being aware and being capable of embracing something new and not being turned off about on it. I don't need to know that. I'm gonna do it the same old way. I'm gonna stick with my gasoline automobile. It's gonna be around forever. I've heard people say that, in 2030 cars are going away that burn gasoline and things of that nature. And I've heard about these different states that are putting laws in place. By golly, I'm not gonna do it. Yeah, that was some of the concepts that have been around for years where people did not lean into change. People did not lean into evolution. And it can be problematic for those individuals because I believe as a society, as human beings, the majority are going to lean that way, especially when we talk about environmental protection, especially when we talk about energy transition, especially when we talk about sustainability. I am more concerned about Mother Earth for my grandchildren than I am for me. The reason that I participate in recycling, the reason that I participate in the things at work that support the energy transition and improving the capability of processes and facilities is because I want Mother Earth to be around for my grandchildren and great grandchildren. It's going to be around for me, but I'm not concerned about Mother Earth for me. I'm concerned about Mother Earth for my legacy, and not my legacy at work, my legacy within the people that will share my bloodline, the Howards.
Mhm. I say we take a moment to thank God for not using brooms as safety devices, and we now know how to use seat belts.
Exactly.
Britt, I am so happy that you are here and you're promoting the energy transition and sustainability to our industry because we have the ability to influence how we bid projects. We have the ability to challenge operations, to produce jobs in a different way, and to think about jobs in a different way, and to have you on their side to support the safety aspect of it. It's so critical because it is scary for some people to wanna do it a different way. Like, that's what we're, encountering oftentimes with our operational team is if if you've been getting into the same car for the last 5 years and putting your seatbelt on the same way, what would happen if you got into, a Lamborghini or a McLaren and you saw this seatbelt fly up out of nowhere? It's different.
Hmm.
It's a transition. That's what the energy transition stands for, is adopting the growth mindset to support it.
Exactly.
Britt, I believe that I could talk to you all day. I know that I have the pleasure of talking to you now and, on a monthly basis, but I want you to be able to close us out with what you want to tell our people in the industry. Is it further elaborating on that growth mindset, but what do you want to inspire our people with?
Hmm. Well, I didn't plan for this. Thanks for asking the question. From my heart of hearts, for everybody that's listening, and I love that you've put this together, Marcia, to make it simplistic because it is, I think, intimidating for some people. I think it is confusing for some people. We have individuals within our industry that try and make this so academic
Yes.
that it's a challenge for some. It has been challenging for me. So thanks for putting this together to put it in simplistic terms. So with that being said, I would ask all of your listeners, all of your viewers to think about energy transition as not being something that they should be intimidated about, not being something for others to think about or to do something about, but for all of us to embrace it, to learn as much as we can at the pace that's comfortable for us, and to start out, if we're not already, doing the little things. Probably every community in the United States, I'll say, has some type of energy transition, recycling program in place, even if it's participating in your community recycling program, even if it's to stop using the hazardous pesticides or herbicides that I used to use to kill weeds, investigate and find something that's healthier for Mother Earth while still getting the basic things done. Just doing those little things as individuals and collectively will make a greater impact. From our industry partners that are listening and viewing right now, I would ask them, I would challenge them to keep leaning in, to influence not only their work family members, but also the people that they interact with at home and in their community, to embrace the fact that this is our responsibility to protect Mother Earth. Not for us. Everybody that can hear or see me right now probably won't feel the potential negative impacts of global warming, the potential negative impacts of what carbon is doing to our atmosphere. But for our grandchildren and great grandchildren and for civilizations to come. That's what I would ask your listeners and viewers to think about. And this is not me as an environmentalist. This is me as a husband, a son, a father, as a human being.
Britt, it has been a pleasure. I really, really look forward to seeing what you are going to do in the future for the safety in this transition space. And as I mentioned before, this industry is lucky to have you. So, for all of the listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As I like to close out with every episode, stay happy, but most importantly, stay safe.
Excellent. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you all so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you're notified every time a podcast is released. Find Elemental Energy on Facebook and connect with me, Marcia Leonard, on LinkedIn. But lastly, and most importantly, share this podcast with your family and your friends, especially if you are in the energy industry and you're having an influence on the path of decarbonization. I'm on this journey figuring things out, and I want you guys to come along. So the closer I can get to you and the more I can connect with you, the better this show will be and become. Yes, Britt, that was excellent.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's, as you can see, it's simplifying the decarbonization space because who is easier to listen to, the philosopher or the storyteller?
Right. I agree.
And I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I don't claim to be the smartest person in the room, but I know when I have smart people around me who need help in simplifying their message,
Hmm.
and that's what I'm just really trying to do with elemental energy.
Good
So
for you.